Hi everyone, I'm here today to talk to you about books that I turn to when I'm looking for a comforting read. I think that's something that we could all do with at the moment. So I've pulled lots of books off my shelves. Some of them I'm going to have mentioned many times before, but just as a reminder, as books that I love, nearly dropped them there, and why I love them. All of the books that I mentioned today will be linked in the description box down below. And also next week I would like to film a book recommendation that's specific to you. I often do this at Christmas when I say, if there's someone in your life and you need a gift for them and you're stuck for ideas, you can leave a comment saying, "Dear Jen, I'm looking for a book for this person. They like these things. What would you recommend?" I would like to do that, but not necessarily for a person in your life, maybe just for you. So you can say, I like these things, like these are my hobbies and these are the kind of things that I enjoy, or I'm looking for a book that is like this other book. And then I'm gonna make a response video where I recommend books to each of you. So if you would like a recommendation, please leave a comment down below giving me some details, some things that I can use as a jumping off point, and I will make that video soon. I'm also gonna make a video where I talk about my favourite audiobooks, an updated video on that, because I have talked about some of my favourite audiobooks before. So there may be quite a few comforting reads that I only have in audiobook form that I may forget to mention today. But I think, judging by the piles of books surrounding me, we have enough to be getting on with. So first off, one of the things I like to read if I'm looking for a comforting read is a reread. So going back to books I have read dozens of times before, and that's normally as a child. So I really like revisiting the Harry Potter audiobooks. I tend not to read them anymore, I just listen to them. The other week, I think only last week, but time is doing weird things at the moment, I reread all of the Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging books by Louise Renison, and I vlogged that weekend, so I'll link that video down below. I had a right old giggle re-listening to and rereading all 10 of those books. I also am keen to pick up Ballet Shoes again by Noel Stratfield. I haven't read this in forever. I don't think I read any of the other Shoes books that she did, so that's the only one that I tend to go back and reread. I also want to reread When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit by Judith Carr, which is an autobiographical novel about her time fleeing Germany in the 1930s. There are quite a few things in here that are obviously very stressful given the time that she's writing about, but because it's written from a child's point of view, there's still something calming about it, that she's writing about such huge events but is very grounded in the now and in the family and the love that's surrounding her, and I think I find that aspect of the book comforting, as well as the nostalgia that I associate with it. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass are two of my favourite books, and at the moment I am reading these books aloud on Instagram Live. So every day at 3 p.m. UK time I'm doing about half an hour, so reading a couple of chapters, and I started doing that today as this video goes up. So if you would like to listen to me reading Alice, then you can head over to my Instagram. Those lives are saved to my profile for 24 hours, so you can either listen live or you can keep them for a bedtime story later. And as we know, my favourite children's book ever is, well, actually favourite book ever is Northern Lights by Philip Pullman, so the His Dark Materials trilogy. So these are the children's, this is bordering on between children and adult crossover book that I like to go back to time and time again for comfort reading purposes. The rest of these books are in no particular order. So Names for the Sea, Strangers in Iceland by Sarah Moss. I find this book comforting because it's a non-fiction book, a memoir where she is talking about the year that she moved to Iceland with her family. It's a really alienating and strange experience for her, but she learns to adapt very quickly, makes friends, learns about folklore and food, and I think there's something very comforting about being immersed in the culture of a different place, but learning new ways and adapting. I think that adapting fills us with hope. Diary of a Bookseller by Sean Bythell. Sean runs The Bookshop, which is the largest secondhand bookshop in Scotland, in Wigtown, which is Scotland's booktown. This is a very sarcastic diary of what it's like to be a bookseller. Kind of Adrian Mole, but in a bookshop and not objectifying women. it's the diary of Bernard Black. Basically, Sean is Bernard, and I've said that to him many times before, and I think it's a badge of honour that he would happily wear. And if we're talking about bookshops and the warmth that they bring us, if I may, I would recommend my own book, which is the Bookshop Book. I wrote this book to celebrate weird and wonderful bookshops all around the world and the fantastic people who run them. So Sean is in here along with the other booksellers who work in Wigtown, which, as I said, is Scotland's book town. So it's a town filled with bookshops. It's a town where people pledge to turn their living rooms into bookshops so that you have a whole street lined with bookshops that sell different things. I spoke to people who had bookshops on boats and on buses, sometimes on the back of camels and on donkeys, travelling bookshops, the largest bookshops ever, the smallest bookshops filled with animals, bookshops that only stock one book, hundreds and thousands of copies of just one book that the bookshop owner himself had written. If you want to read about how books connect people, bookish communities, and just all of the great things that come out of loving books, then I know I'm biased, but honestly, I think that this book would be like a hug right now. So I will link it down below along with everything else that I am mentioning. I wanted to mention this graphic memoir called Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Brosh. Many of you are probably familiar with this. Ali had a really successful blog called Hyperbole and a Half. And in this, she draws short comics talking about depression and anxiety. And it's a very clever way of discussing serious topics, but in a funny way that doesn't undermine the seriousness of those topics. The subheading is Unfortunate Situations, Flawed Coping Mechanisms, Mayhem, and Other Things That Happened. It's joyful. This may sound like a very strange recommendation, but I'm going to throw it in there, and that is I Am by Maggie O'Farrell, 17 Brushes with Death. You may be able to understand from the subheading why I think it's a strange one to put into this video, but this is Maggie talking about her life and picking out various instances where she's either been really close to possibly dying, or there's been some small thing that happened in a day that if she'd done something differently, there is the possibility that things could have gone very wrong. And yes, she is talking about death in this quite a lot in various different forms, but she's using that as a jumping off point to talk about life affirming things and how important certain things are to her, the people in her life, and how she clings to every precious moment with them. And therefore, I find this book really uplifting despite the subject matter. I know that this won't be for everybody when we're talking about comfort reads, but if it sounds like it may appeal to you, I thought it was worth including. Elizabeth's Lists by Lula Ellender is a book I've spoken about quite a lot recently because I read it at the end of 2019 and it was one of my favourite books. This is a family history, but it's told through a series of lists. So Lula's mother gave Lula a book of lists that her grandmother had written, lists writing down how many eggs her chickens had laid that day and indeed every day for the past however many years, all of the things that she needed to pack to take from place to place. She was the daughter of a British ambassador, I think actually. Daughter of a British ambassador, daughter of a British ambassador, then married a diplomat. So she travelled around a lot as a child to China and other places, and then as an adult married to a diplomat. She lived in Madrid, she lived in Lebanon, she lived in Rio, she lived in so many different places. And there's also just a wonderful discussion in here about Lula's grandmother's relationship with her brother. It's heartbreaking but also warm and lovely. And there's just something really playful, experimental and heartfelt about imagining the life of a grandmother that you never knew and creating this tapestry of her life through the notes that she's left behind. I know again that might sound sad, but I just think it's loving, and the time that she's taken to create this project is just lovely. Again, perhaps slightly odd suggestions, but I wanted to include these two books from Anna Lightman. This is The Accidental Universe, which is a series of essays about the universe and how vast everything is. And I find it comforting because it's zooming out and it's looking at all the things, one, that we don't know, but also the things that we have come to understand, things that we thought we would never be able to understand at one point, and how far science has come. And the other one of his is a novel, but it reads more like a series of short stories, and this is Einstein's dreams. So in this, Einstein is coming up with his theory of relativity, and he's having lots of different dreams about how time can materialize in different ways. So he has dreams where he's walking around a place where you could walk to the next town, which is the 1600s, or you could walk to a town in another direction and you would end up in the future. There are just different imaginings physically of time and space. So magical, and I think that because it's talking about science and possibility, I find it very hopeful. I couldn't find my copy of this. I'm not sure where it is. In fact, actually, this is not where this one is, but most of my novels from authors A to G are in bags and still haven't been unpacked. So there may be some in there that I'm not talking about, so apologies to the authors who fall into that category. But I also have a non-fiction book by Robert Macfarlane called Wonderland, which is all about the hidden wonders of the earth. So inside caves, and it's told again with such love. I think nature writing at the moment, at least I'm finding it so comforting. We're still going for our 5 a.m. walks and hearing the bird song and the squirrels in the woods and realizing that they don't have a clue about what's going on. I find that really comforting. So reading about the earth and all the secrets of the earth that we don't know and how it's going about its own business, I just find really lovely to read about. So even though I couldn't lay my hands on it because it's hiding somewhere, I don't know how it's managing to do that because it's huge, I thought I would recommend that. Going back to novels, I would recommend The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making. I just realised I'm holding up the wrong one. This is a different one in that series. This is not the first one. Read the first one. It's about a girl called September who is whisked off to Fairyland on the back of the green wind, and she has to save the day. It is a children's book, but I read it as an adult, which is why I didn't include it in the children's section. It's rich in its language and it has so many wonderful images in it. I would link it to how I feel about Return to Oz, the film, without being terrified, because I love all of the little tasks that Dorothy has to do in that and how dark and twisted it can be in places. But it's not, this book is in no way scary. So be comforted by that, because my goodness, the Room of Heads in Return to Oz, I still dream about that. Also another novel I would recommend is Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. This is my favourite book of hers that I have read so far. It is about a young girl called Nan who falls in love with a girl called Kitty who performs on the stage, and they run off together to London and decide that they're going to pursue a life in the theatre. And it's very Dickensian no, not in style, because I'm not a fan of Dickens style. It's very Dickensian in theme and in tone. The writing style itself is very, very different, but it has that long narrative where lots of things happen and it takes place over a huge period of time, and there are lots of different side characters. You can often tell where it's going, but that doesn't matter because you're having a good time when you're reading it. 3 really large novels to lose yourself in. The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. This will also be one of the audiobooks that I'm recommending, spoiler, in my audiobook video, because I listened to it. It is so delightful. It is Pride and Prejudice, but told from the point of view of Mary. The first third of the book is set in the time of Pride and Prejudice. The rest is set afterwards, and we see what happens to all of the characters, but as I said, following Mary, and she narrates everything. All of the characters feel very, very real, whilst also stepping out of the perimeters they were granted in the original novel. So she just expands them in a way that feels completely organic, and I just think that that's really, really impressive. One of my favourite novels, as you know, is A Place for Us by Fatemeh Farheen Mirza. This is about 5 members of one family, an Indian-American Muslim family, and it spans, is it 10 years? Oh, it's been a while since I read it. It's been nearly 3 years since I read it. I think it spans 10 years, maybe 20 years. It's all about the tiny little things that we don't really think about, but all of the little gestures, all of the little things that we say that add up together to make a huge thing happen. Another book that is very slow but deliberate and methodical is Wolf Border by Sarah Hall. This is about a woman who's studying the behaviour of wolves, and she comes over from Canada, I think. Yes, Canada, to the Lake District, where they're thinking of reintroducing wolves into the English countryside. And it's about how feral humanity can be, and it's about divisions and how we judge people and what we deem to be humane. It's as I said, because she's observing animals, there's something really quiet about that. I have to mention 84 Charing Cross Road, which again I couldn't find on my shelves, but it's there somewhere. A non-fiction book told in letter format between an American woman and a bookseller on Charing Cross Road, and it is just delightful. Again, if you love bookshops, you will love that, and if you love books, you will also love the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, which is also told in letter form and is letters between an author in London and this book club on Guernsey, and she goes to visit them, and she, well, I don't want to say more than that, but it's also about the occupation of Guernsey by Germany, and about the power of books and bringing people together. The film is really great too, actually, but it will make you cry. It'll warm your heart, but it will make you cry. That's okay, isn't it? Crying is cathartic. I would also recommend this huge heavy book here by Brian Selznick called Wonderstruck. This is part middle grade novel and part graphic novel. Let me find you some of the pictures. Pictures look like this. This book is about two children, both of whom are deaf in very different circumstances. So Ben becomes deaf and his chapters are told in words. Rose was born deaf and her chapters are told in pictures. And hers are told in pictures because she loves the cinema. She loves silent cinema, and it's the one place she feels that she can go, and she feels as though she understands everything just the same as everyone else. But the time of her narrative is recorded is the time when talkies are coming into the cinema, and she's really upset by this because she feels as though that is going to be another place where she is going to be made to feel different. She's constantly told that she needs to adapt herself in order to fit into a hearing world instead of the hearing world adapting to her deafness. And I don't want to say more about it, like how the two narratives connect, but it's a bit magical and it's really heartwarming, and I would recommend it for both children and grown-ups. I also have to recommend these books in general. So the British crime classics, Cozy Crime. This one is not very seasonal, like for the current season, because this is The Santa Claus Murder by Mavis Dorial Hay, but it is my favourite one that I've read so far. So if you fancy pretending that it's Christmas, I know some people have been putting up their Christmas lights to cheer themselves up, then you could reach for this one. It's set in an old house. There's a murder. It's Christmas. I mean, as you probably would have guessed by the title. And I also recommend Persephone books. So these are classics mainly written by women which have been reissued. And I would particularly recommend Doreen by Barbara Noble, which is about a young girl called Doreen who has been evacuated during the Second World War. And it's about her engaging with this new family that she's been sent to, and also missing her mum back home, and trying to balance those feelings and that uncertainty. So those are all the books that I wanted to recommend today. Do let me know what books you would recommend for comfort reading in a comment down below. I have Red, White and Royal Blue and This Green and Pleasant Land on my TBR, both of which I believe will be very comforting as well. So I'll link those down below if you want to go check them out. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I'm reading Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass over on Instagram at the moment, if you would like to go and check that out. And please also leave a comment down below if you would like a personalised book recommendation. Just let me know some things that you enjoy, or a book that you have loved and you're hoping to find another book similar to, and then I will make a video where I answer all of those queries with book recommendations. I hope you're all doing okay, and I'll speak to you very soon. Lots of love. Bye.